This is Raina Campbell, your Chief Dream Driver, and welcome to the No Parking Podcast, where through conversations and discussions with creators like yourself, we'll find interesting approaches to help you take your dreams out of park, put them in drive, and ride towards success. Hey Dream Drivers, welcome to episode 99 of the Dreams and Drive podcast, and today our guest is Nicaila Matthews, who's the creator and host of Side Hustle Pro, which is a podcast that spotlights bold Black women entrepreneurs who have scaled from side hustle to full-time entrepreneurship. The show has generated over 250,000 downloads in a year, and she has amassed a loyal community of over 30,000 aspiring entrepreneurs. Now, Nicaila is somebody that I've been able to talk to personally about this podcast game, and I've really come to admire what she's built with her podcast and her business, and I just love the way that she runs her community and her hustle and her focus. So it was so awesome to have her on the show. Plus, she's a fellow Jamaican, so we had lots of things to talk about. Some of the things that we really dive into this episode that I think that you guys will really find useful is what it was like being a woman of color at an Ivy League university. So she went to UPenn. She talks about that. We talk about why Nicaila thinks getting an MBA was extremely valuable and worth the investment. We talk about how not getting an offer at Google devastated yet motivated her at the same time. Nicaila dives into the origin story of the Side Hustle Pro podcast. And so one of the things that we really talk about in this episode that I think you'll find useful is social media. Social media was probably one of the biggest factors in helping Nicaila grow her podcast. So we talk about why you absolutely need it in 2017, why she chose Instagram as her platform of choice, 3 strategies that you can use to grow your social media fans, her favorite business tools, and then we really have this interesting conversation about the idea of legacy and what that means to her. So this is going to be an episode that I know you guys will enjoy. Make sure that you are subscribed to us wherever you're listening, whether it be SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Play, Apple Podcasts. Hit that subscribe button. But especially if you are an Apple Podcast listener, make sure that you rate the show and leave a review if you really, really love it. I not only say this because, ratings are good, but one of my goals is, as I told you guys, monetization. I recently had a conversation with an executive from a podcast agency, and she was just talking about how a lot of advertisers actually do their research, right? And they go on the Apple Podcast page, and they look at recent reviews of what people are saying about the show. And they also look at the amount of reviews. So if you're a podcaster listening in, reviews are very important because that's what these executives are looking at when they're vetting your show. So you really want to make sure you have recent reviews and that you can amass, a solid amount, especially depending upon how many people are downloading your show each week. So I'd really appreciate if you guys rated us and left a review. Now, one thing I want to talk about before we jump into the episode is this idea of really stepping outside your comfort zone. And this is just my message, my personal message for the week is lately I've been really getting signs that it's time for me to step it up a notch, right? I was recently talking to Greg Hill, whose podcast I was on, and he was like, yo, Raina, you got to get into the live podcast game. I had a listener send me an Instagram DM and ask me, if I was going to write books or really do some kind of speaking engagements. My mastermind group has really been on me to launch some kind of course and to do some kind of consulting. People have emailed me about consulting. And I think for me personally, this podcast has now become my comfort zone. In the beginning, this podcast was my challenge, but I really feel like I've kind of mastered the process of the podcast, and now I kind of feel comfortable doing this beyond solo episodes, which are a little nerve-wracking for me. The podcast is kind of like a piece of cake. So now it's like, what's next? So for anyone who's listening who also may feel like you're currently sitting in your comfort zone and you really need to push past it, I want to just encourage you to keep thinking of ways that you can do so. Keep surrounding yourself with people that are constantly challenging you. I think one of my best friends recently the other day, she was like, Raina, you need to stop talking about it and be about it. You interview guests all the time. You're talking about putting your dreams in drive, but don't let this podcast now be what's holding you back from the next step. So it is my goal to really step out of my comfort zone and to start launching these other projects and ideas that I've been working on. I know that the podcast is something that I can do successfully. So now I need to it's time. I think it's time to add on another project and to really start working on myself and my business, because yes, Dreams and Drive is a business. I think I shared with you guys in February, I officially made it an LLC. I'm in my final stages of the trademarking process. My vision for Dreams and Drive is not for it to only be a podcast. So I need to start acting like that's what the vision is and really start, making these moves that I have planned out and I have goaled out. I know my gift. I feel it in my soul. And now it's time to put that into action. I'm trying to be great. I really feel like I'm not trying to sound egotistical here or anything, but I think sometimes we are scared to say that. We're scared to say, like, I want to be great. And I don't think that that's something that we should run away from. Embrace that feeling and that desire within you, because that is what's going to drive you. So last thing I want to say is make sure you're following us on social at Dreams and Drive, and use the hashtag Dreams and Drive when you're listening to us. I really, really love how you guys have been so generous with your screenshotting. Over the past few weeks, you guys have just been screenshotting the episodes or Instagram stories. So continue to do that. That's a great way to share what you're doing with your own fan base. And that's also a great way to promote and help build the Dreams and Drive community. So I really appreciate it. All right. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Hi, Nicaila. Welcome to Dreams and Drive.
Hello, hello. I'm so excited to be here and be on the other side of the mic.
I know. It's always so weird, right? When you're getting interviewed, when you're so used to being interviewed.
It is really odd, but it's good to put myself in my guest shoes so I can be that much better as an interviewer.
I'm about to turn the heat up in this interview. Be ready.
Oh gosh.
I'm just playing. I don't even think I have heat if I wanted to have heat. So don't worry. So I actually want to switch things up a little bit. So I normally start my interviews with the same question, but today on my drive home, I felt called to start the interview in a different way. All right. So what I want to ask you to kind of just set the tone for this interview is, when you think of the word dream driving, right? What does being a dream driver mean to you?
Being a dream driver to me means being proactive about creating the life you want and not being complacent about it and, complaining about things that aren't going the right way. It's like saying, here is the vision I have and going after it. I'm always a big proponent of saying, create the life you want. And that's what I aim to do really with having a side hustle, create the life, the skills, all of that you want.
I love that. I think that's a great way to kind of set the tone for everything that we talk about, because we're going to be talking about how you've created this life or are creating this life that you want. But let's take it back. I love to start the interviews with kind of thinking about who you were as a child. So if I had to say, who was Nicaila? I'm going to give you an age. 8.5. At 8.5.
8.5. Wow.
What inspired Nicaila, the 8.5-year-old?
So Nicaila, the 8.5-year-old, was definitely a bookworm. Oh my gosh. When I was that age, my favorite thing to do was when, my mom or my sisters or dad, we would go to the library, and at the time you could get up to 10 books, and I would always get exactly 10 books. I would maximize my library, subscription, and I would just go home and read. I had a big imagination. I would really just put myself in the lives of my characters. I would write my own stories, and I would also act out things. I was also, so my siblings are 4, 5, and 10 years older than me. So
you were the baby?
By the time I was the baby. So by the time I was 8, they were already off doing their cool kid stuff. So I was alone a lot, just in my own world, making up stories. And I think that's really where my creativity and imagination started, because I spent so much time just in my head.
It's so interesting how I'm telling you, I've interviewed, let's say, so many people, right? so many of the people that we've had on the show have been bookaholics as youngsters. I wonder if that's just a trend for creatives, people pursuing entrepreneurship. Is like an early love for books.
New world. Yeah, the books would let you escape to a new world, and it was just awesome.
Did you have a favorite book as a kid?
As a kid, I really liked this book called Anne of Green Gables. And I remember I actually got it for Christmas one year from my sister. And it was this huge book. And I remember thinking like, why would she get me this book? And then I just fell in love with just the stories, the writing. I also used to love series a lot. So I think just that world of fiction would just take me away to places I'd never been.
What was the dream back then? Maybe not as an 8-year-old, but maybe just as an adolescent. What did you picture yourself being, quote unquote, when you grew up? What was it that you wanted to be?
It's funny. What I wanted to be, I look back now and I'm like, where did that come from? I vividly remember wanting to be an actress. I don't know where I got this idea from. It must have been something about the stories and the writing and the storytelling. So I remember once, maybe I was like 10 or 11, I somehow found out about this audition. And I had my mom take me to this audition in New York. We lived in the Bronx. Downtown to Manhattan. And then I went downtown, just a regular girl in my jeans, my cornrows. And I looked around at all these showbiz kids and I was like, wait a second, this is not for me. And we kept walking. I was like, I don't know what that world is about, but let's keep going. So that transition to, at one point, I wanted to be a broadcast journalist. So something in me always wanted to do things with communications. And that's what I ended up majoring in college. Like I didn't have the whole picture figured out, but I always knew like I loved TV. I loved storytelling. Like that was the world that I flourished in.
That's so crazy that you said that you wanted to be an actress, because like when I was younger, my mom thought I was going to be like some kind of show biz kid. And I can't remember the program. There was this program. Oh my God. It was All Star, some kind of program where they had auditions every year. And I remember going to the auditions, and when you go to those type of auditions, there are kids there who like wanted to be actors or actresses since they were like in the womb, and they were so much on top of their stuff, and you just go there, you're like, yeah, I can't really sing. You just walk in there,
yes, like a regular person. You're like, oh, wait a second.
Right, I thought my monologue was the best thing ever until you hear everyone else's monologues. You're like, oh, yes. All right, well, Mom, that didn't go so well, but it's all right. So you said you went to Penn and you majored in communications. Why communications?
So by the time I went to Penn, I think in high school, you kind of like flesh out your interests a little bit more in high school with all the clubs that you're involved in. And I had started interning early, like at age 16. I somehow finagled an internship at HBO. And so I got a little bit of a taste of the media entertainment field, and I knew to get back into that field, like those were the kind of majors that people would gravitate to. So Penn didn't have a journalism major, so if it did, I probably would have done journalism. But communications was like the umbrella where everyone who was interested in anything related to media majored in. So that's what drew me to communications.
You know what's funny? I try to explain this to people when we talk about liberal arts schools that don't have like very specific majors. Going to Ivy League, right? It's like, all right, they're like sociology. Why would you do sociology? I'm like, because that was the only other thing that really made sense. But what was your experience like being at an Ivy League?
So my experience, and just real quickly, tangent, like my dad for the longest time would like side eye my major. Like he just could never understand.
What is this? Communications?
Right. My Jamaican parents were like, what in the world did we just do? Like, did we really send you to college for you to do that? And I was just like, I think because they knew how ambitious I was. Like I said, I was interning young. They gave me a little bit of benefit of the doubt. But yeah, that just got major side eye in my family. But anywho, my experience at Penn and Ivy, the only school I went to. So at Penn, it was tough at first. It was a big culture shock for me. Now, I had gone to school. First of all, I grew up in the Bronx, working class, middle class neighborhood, and was always around I call us regular people, right? And then in high school, I started getting a taste of not so regular people. I was like, oh, okay, there's some people out here with money who don't know what to do with themselves. And then Penn took it to that next level where I was like, who are these people? What are they talking about? Like, they talk about boats and summer homes and all this stuff I just couldn't relate to. Like spring break, if they just wanted to hop on a flight, like I still had to ask my parents. Like I couldn't just hop on a flight to another country. Like I couldn't just be planning these spring break extravaganzas. So it was just a huge culture shock with blending in and really finding my crew. I eventually did find my home. We was through a dance group, and I know you were in a dance group as well.
Yes, I was gonna say we are like digital BFFs. We are like the same people. Okay, sorry.
So once I found, African Rhythms, the West African dance crew, that it was just on. Like I found my people. I finally felt at home. But I thought about transferring to Syracuse, actually. I was like, what other communication school is out there that might have regular people? Like I seriously was just not feeling the whole Ivy League bouginess, just to be frank. And then I finally found my stride. And I guess to some respect, there's a place for everyone at Penn. There might not be as many of you, but there are a lot of people who come from, places where, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but, every year you go back, there'll be your contingent from New York and the inner city. There'll be your contingent from Bougieville. So there is a place for everyone. It might just take you a little longer to find it.
You know what one of my biggest regrets at Princeton was? Not being in the friend group with the friends who were going to the different countries for spring break. My friend groups, we were all going home on a train. I'm like, damn, I should have had some different friends. How'd I get stuck with y'all?
I couldn't afford to be in that friend group. I couldn't afford it.
But some of their, how sometimes you're like, oh, don't worry about it. We got you. Mama, just come. Don't worry about it. I never had that friend group, but it's whatever. It is whatever. Thinking about it now, do you wish that you would have transferred? Thinking about where you are now in your career, do you think it would have been worthwhile to go to a school that, was really into communications and journalism, such as Syracuse?
No, looking back, I'm glad I didn't transfer because, Penn has a lot to offer. And I'm looking at it now through the lens of all the activities and experiences I had. So it's kind of hard to think about it without that, because I had experiences where I know I wouldn't be who I am today had I not, for example, I was a RA, and just things that just were unique to my experience at Penn. Then at the same time, Penn is also a really rich communication school. And that's the reason I chose it. True story, Raina, when I went on a college tour to Penn, that was the first time I heard of it. I didn't know anything about Penn being an Ivy League. Everyone's heard of Harvard, Yale, but I went up to the campus and I remember thinking it was a cold, rainy day. I remember thinking ugh, this place is ugly. And then later on, talking to my guidance counselor and telling her my interest in communication, she was like, you should look at this school. I was like, what is, Ivy League? It is really? You know how people get Penn and Penn State confused? Yeah. I would have fallen in the bucket. So for me, it was about the program that really drew me to the school.
So you didn't go to Penn, UPenn for Penn Relays as a Jamaican, and you live in New York?
Listen. We never went to Penn Relays when I was growing up. Oh, we would watch it on TV, but again, I didn't make the connection. I thought Penn State was Penn Relays. Since we never went, I didn't make that connection.
It's funny because Penn was the only school that I didn't get into, and it was the school that I thought I really wanted to go to because I thought Princeton was a little bit too suburban for me, and Penn waitlisted me, and I really didn't want to go there, but oh well. Went to Princeton, had a good time there. But let's fast forward a little bit. So you graduated from Penn, and then you went to university. Well, I don't know if you went right after, but eventually you went to University of Michigan and you got an MBA. Did you think getting your MBA was useful? And if so, how? Or why?
Yes. So I worked for a number of years before I went back and got my MBA, and I experienced a few different industries. So straight out of undergrad, I worked at MTV. Then I'd taken some time off, gone through kind of a mid-20s crisis because I knew I hated PR, which was what I was doing, but didn't know where I really fit in. And then just by chance landed in social media marketing at a startup. And from there, was able to transition to a higher level marketing role. And then I started seeing like patterns at each place. I started seeing that I was really great at the creative stuff. Like, again, had always been in my head, had a great imagination. But when it came to making a business case for why we were doing something, I struggled with that a little bit because I'd always shied away from numbers. I hated like having to prove something with hard facts and figures. And I just, finally came to a realization one day that I can't keep shying away from this, especially because I was getting more and more, I was realizing more and more that, hey, I would love to work for myself one day because these bosses are for the birds. And if I want to do that, I really do need to have some grounding in business. So that's what made me go back and get my MBA. And I'm 100% happy that I did go back and take that step, because for me, it was finally pairing like that creative side with true knowledge about the inner workings of business. So accounting and statistics, and just having to sit in a class and dissect quarterly reports and, business statements. I was like, I had never done that before. I had shied away from it. At Penn, you can really just skate on through, take one little quant class for your requirement, and then never have to look at anything quant again. So that's what I did in my liberal arts education. And
I took magic of numbers for my math requirement. Magic of numbers.
Paper. I feel like I was folding paper. I don't know what I did, but so the GMAT was excruciating. But I got through it. Took that a couple of times, and the biggest thing I got from the MBA is this just newfound confidence and lens about entrepreneurship. So I wasn't thinking this way. Like the whole side hustle pro mindset, that is a direct correlation from the experiences that I went through in business school, for sure.
What year was this?
I graduated business school in 2015 from the Ross School of Business.
Okay. So is that when you then got the job at NPR? Because you started that in 2015, right?
Right. So I graduated in May, and I actually graduated without a job. I had interned for Google in ad sales in the summer of 2014 between my first and second years. But, and that was, a really cool experience. I was out in California in Mountain View, really learning the Google culture and learning more about ad sales and Google's suite of products. But then at the end of the internship, I didn't get a final offer, and I was really devastated, like not even being dramatic. I was so bummed because I thought for sure I was going to get the offer, and then, I would go work for them full time. Boom, like, MBA experience, like done, like accomplished everything I went for. But when that didn't happen, I went through another period of just like reflection and just confusion about what do I do next? Like after you've worked for Google, you kind of feel like, like where else am I going to get free food?
I was just thinking that, like you have to go back to making your own lunch.
Like, what other company do I want to work for? So I spent some time looking at other tech companies, and it was tough because with tech companies, they, for the most part, when they say marketing, they mean ad sales. And I didn't want to do ad sales. I was not into that. And I really wanted to be a true marketer. And I wanted to do digital marketing and social media marketing. And that was not, there was no role for that. There was no box that I fit in at B school and for B school recruiting. Graduated then without a job. And that's when I started blogging and doing different things again to like just kind of, regenerate that energy of who I am and what I'm good at. And through doing that, started consulting for a nonprofit, spent like my summer doing that. And then the NPR role came along. And when I say came along, it really came along because it was like my first boss ever from HBO reached out to me about the opening, and it just, all worked out from there. It was one of those things where, you know how they say, like, when you want something too much, like you don't get it, or just sometimes when you don't want something, it's the best way to interview because you're not desperate. And if you don't get it, it's kind of like dating, right? When you're really pressed, like that's not attractive. And so that's how the NPR interview and recruitment process was. I was very, I won't say casual, but I was able to be my true self because I was consulting at the time and I was starting to think about maybe I'll just do this. I'll just open my own consulting business and never go back to a corporate office again. So I came at it that way. And through just conversations, I started to interview, and then, they offered me a full-time role. And at the time I was like, you know what, I think I want to work a little bit more before I go out on my own.
Okay. So during this time, you said after you graduated from business school, that seed of entrepreneurship was planted in you. How did Side Hustle Pro come along? What was that? Like, what's the origin story behind starting the podcast?
Yes. So Side Hustle Pro came about so organically and accidentally, kind of. So when I didn't have a job, I started blogging again. My blog was KaylaKSpeaks.com, just a personal blog that I had started a few years before business school, but let die. And when I originally started up the blog again, and also put up a personal website, NicailaMatthews.com. And the intention behind that was to showcase my portfolio, really, because I was back on the job hunt, like hitting the ground, really wanting to showcase, how dynamic of a candidate I was. And I started out blogging about really dry topics like marketing and the tech industry. And I was like, this is boring. I want to talk to people. I love hearing people's stories. So I started interviewing people on the blog. And then that transitioned to interviewing entrepreneurial women because they really inspired me. And before you know it, I was doing consistent interviews, but I realized they were getting a little long-winded because I know I don't have an attention span. So I was like, no one's really reading this. They're not reading to the end. And around that time, someone introduced me to podcasts. Believe it or not, I had never listened to a podcast until 2015. Someone told me about The Read, and I started listening to that. And then I started toying around with the idea of starting my own podcast because I just wasn't doing these interviews justice with just a blog post Q&A. And so I started to think through what it would be about. I realized that I was talking to side hustlers a lot. So that's when that concept came about. And slowly but surely, I started learning about podcasting, decided I was going to do it. And I did it in 2016, June 2016, officially launched Side Hustle Pro.
When you launched, did you have specific goals in mind? Because sometimes I think about when I first launched Dreams and Drive, I really didn't sit down and think about what it could be. You have a short-term vision, but for me personally, I hadn't developed that long-term vision. But when you started it, did you already kind of have a path set out for how you wanted the growth story to look like?
I didn't know what it would be. I remember thinking it was more like, let's just try this, see what happens. Then okay, we're going to start this and I want to get to X by X and I want to get to X. I didn't know what realistic downloads were for an independent podcaster. So that's number one. I didn't know what.
Does anyone know? Because I feel like I don't know. I still don't know. Okay.
I still don't know. But what I did know was I'd listened to things like John Lee Dumas's podcasting course, and I remember him or someone else saying hey, if you're going to start a podcast, really make sure you want to do it for a year and commit to doing it for a year. So that's one thing that I committed to. I was like, I'm going to do this consistently for a year and see what happens after that. That was my only goal.
Mm-hmm. And did you have any pushback from your job? Because you were working at NPR. I mean, they don't have to know what you were doing, but did you feel like you had to tell them because they also produce podcasts? Did you feel like you could get help from them since you probably have so many resources at hand there right at work?
Mm-hmm. Well, I never felt like I needed to ask permission. And, again, maybe that's just the mindset I was in coming out of B school, coming out of seeing so many people and reading so many founder stories. I felt like I'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission. Mm-hmm. So that was number one. And number two, I always wanted to keep it separate. Like I went into this knowing that I was truly going to bootstrap and do this as a real independent podcaster would, mainly because if I was to use their equipment or even their resources, then they could claim ownership of it one day. And being the number one publisher, I was like, I don't ever want them to be able to snatch up my podcast, because they are a podcast, a powerhouse. They know how to do podcasts. So I always wanted to keep it separate and just be respectful. And so people would never be able to say, well, we see Nicaila in the booth sometimes. Like, is she doing her podcast? Like, no, I always wanted to be, no one can point their finger at me and say I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. That said, sure, it would be great to, be able to get tips and tricks from people. But what I have done is NPR has a training department, and this is actually public. There's an NPR training blog. They have great audio tips on that blog. They've hosted public webinars. So for sure, I take advantage of that and read the blog. There's, a great one on mics. There's a great one on how to create like a pillow fort studio, which is what I do when I record, and how to like buffer out sound with just your pillows. So I highly recommend that for anyone who's thinking about getting started. Just Google NPR training blog.
And I'll link to that in the show notes, because I've never heard of that too. So I definitely want to check that out. So, okay, let's say 6 months into the podcast, right? Because you launched it in June 2016. What did you know? What was your strategy for growth going into the podcast? Once you realized you had an audience and there were more people out there that needed to hear the stories of the women that you were bringing on the show?
My strategy for growth was to get it in front of as many people as possible, but also get it in front of the people who I knew would be interested in it. So to revise that statement, I wanted to get it in front of as many people who fit my target audience as possible. And the way I did that before starting the podcast, I actually interviewed women. I interviewed fellow side hustlers and told them that I was thinking about starting this podcast, and ask them questions like first of all, figured out what they listen to for inspiration and resources, who they thought of as experts, what podcasts they listen to. So I talk about that in one of my episodes. I believe it was episode 7, and also a little bit in the Master the Gram course, because as you know, like I then went hardcore on Instagram and finding those people that fit my target audience to introduce them to the podcast. Because to me, social media really has been like social networking, and emphasis on the networking part. Mm-hmm. I think of it as no different than walking into a networking event after work. Like I think of it as real relationships, like real people that I would talk to, offline as well as online. And because of that, I think that's how it just genuinely started to grow.
So before we get into some tips that you can share with our audience, what would you say to the person who's like, I don't like social media. I'm not going to use social media to try to grow my business, whatever. You don't need social. What would you say to that person?
Oh my gosh. I have talked about this too. I would say, girl, get over it. If you want to start a business in 2017, get over all of that. You need social media. And yes, you can hire someone to do that, but they need to be in lockstep with you. They need to know everything about your business to do it well, because your brand needs to reflect your personality. I mean, it depends on the type of business you're starting. I won't say it's a one size fits all, but definitely, I would say in 2017, you need social media to grow your business.
And I think sometimes people are just nervous because it may be something that they feel like they haven't excelled at, which is why they just want to write it off, right? So I would also say to people, like, don't be afraid to get help. But I love what you said about you having to put the work in yourself and not outsourcing it, especially from the beginning. And I even say that to people when they're trying like to build a website, or where they're trying to just do like branding stuff in the beginning. Like, it's so important to get your feet wet. And a lot of people don't want to get their feet wet, but they want their tree to grow, but they don't want to get in the soil and plant the seed,
Right, right. And it's like you can't really express to someone what's lacking or what you want unless you just try it out for yourself for a little bit and say, you know what, I'm not good at this, but it would be great if you could create some images that look like this and like, some posts that evoke this kind of feeling. So you will only have that lens if you get down and dirty for at least, the first few months of your business.
Definitely. So let's talk about Instagram, because I know Instagram has been one of your main channels for growth. Why did you choose Instagram over, let's say, Facebook or Twitter to really focus in on?
So I chose Instagram because of the engagement. Like it had higher engagement rates than Facebook and Twitter. And I don't know them off the top of my head what they are now.
Like
but
personal engagement or just like overall engagement?
No. Overall, like industry research, like Forrester research. Yeah. Overall, the platform was growing at a higher percentage and the actual engagement rates were much higher than like Twitter, where people, people have like clicks and groups, but the overall engagement on Twitter, as we know historically by what's happening there with the business, that it is much less than Instagram or even Snapchat. And I chose Instagram because it was also a natural platform for storytelling. There was just something about it that was, even as big as it is, it still felt more intimate. And like when you follow someone on Instagram, like there's more of an intentionality to it and there's more of a relationship building to it than like Facebook, where there's just a lot of noise on Facebook and like I got that. I also tested, so I started out doing content just on Facebook when I started blogging again. And when I would post on Instagram, like the responses that I received were just different. So I was like, I want to build on this and, grow it out and see where it goes.
Did you know where to start when it came to figuring out how to grow it because of your background? Or if not, what did you how did you learn how to grow your Instagram platform?
So initially with any platform, like you really have to spend time massaging and getting to know. It's like a relationship, going on dates. And so although I had a background and knew how to be a good social media marketer, I needed to rethink how I approach Instagram, because initially, just like everyone else, I was using Instagram just to post like random, things from trips or food and restaurants. And when I started to see that it could be a business tool, I had to reinvent my approach. And that's when I switched from being just a personal account to making it, I didn't switch from a personal to business account in Instagram world technically, but I renamed myself Side Hustle Pro. And then I started posting things that were only about the brand. So starting out, I would test a lot. I would try new things. I've gone through like some ugly graphics that I've since like deleted over time. Like, ooh, those were ugly, girl. But, just experimentation.
So for someone trying to, let's say, grow their social media page, what are three top tips that you think, or three strategies that you would give someone for really growing as they would say in marketing, like marketing qualified leads, right? Like people who are potential true fans of your brand.
So how to grow any social media platform?
Or no, if you're a business. So definitely what tips would you give somebody who's trying to grow their social media, their Instagram page, I should say, for their business? What are some things that you really need to keep in mind?
Yeah. So I asked that because I don't believe there's like a one size fits all for all social media platforms so the first thing I encourage businesses to do is to like focus on one or two at a time, because you can't just do a cookie cutter, like spray and pray across platforms and expect it to all have the same results. So number one, that would be what I would advise. But just for Instagram, so my first tip is to think about Instagram and the Instagram platform and your audience there again, like real people who you want to connect with. So I always encourage people to go out and introduce yourselves to people. And how do you do that on Instagram, right? You follow people. Like, people are a little bit weirded out when they first start out in following people they don't know. But in actuality, like, people don't know you exist unless you introduce yourself. And following is the way you introduce yourself on Instagram. Then I would say engage. Like, you have to show people that you're out there, engage with their content for them to then come back to your page, check out what you have going on, and decide if they want to engage with you. And the third thing would be consistency. So you can't just post like once a week and expect to see growth. And especially with Instagram changing up its algorithm all the time. So people get freaked out about algorithm. But if you're posting consistently, you're able to kind of ride the wave of Instagram shifts, because the algorithm will come and go. But once you've built a following that's hooked on your content and they know they can get it consistently, then you'll be able to surpass that. And, I go a little bit, there's so much, fine tuning that I get into in the actual course, because I get into like the actual hacks with things like hashtags, and all of that is a science that we could be here all night.
I know. And mention your course. Tell our dream drivers about your course.
So I have, I built out a course on how to build an engaged audience on Instagram, because so many people would ask me about this. And I really am always open to sharing it. But I realized that you have to kind of break it down in steps. So I built it out into a course. It's called Master the Gram. You can get it at sidehustlepro.co/masterthegram. And that's where I get really, really detailed about this process, because for those of you who aren't following me on Instagram at Side Hustle Pro, like, I started out with 589 followers back in like 2015 when I was first starting out and just had a personal account. And then through these strategies have grown to almost 30,000 now. So
listen, it works.
And those are real people, not bots.
Let me tell you. Okay. So I told my coworker about, I was telling her that I was interviewing you and how I really admire you, because like you grew your following so much. And you know what she said? She was like, I bet you they're fake. Right. And I was like, no, they're not fake. And so she was like, I know a site. Let's put it in the site. Right. And so we put it in the site, and they are not fake. So she was, because I work in marketing too. So she was like, no, I bet you they are fake, Raina. And she was astonished. So you guys listening in, they are not bots. They are real people. Nicaila knows what she's talking about.
Yes.
But one thing that I also really admire about just how you've grown the podcast, and really thinking about the podcast as a business too, because I know that is something that it is how you have other platforms. I really love how you have your Facebook group. Why did making an exclusive Facebook group make sense for your community?
So the Facebook group came about because people would come on Instagram or DM me and have like post-episode thoughts, or just, I would see the same people kind of. I started to feel like I knew them, or people started actually adding me on Facebook. And that's when I kind of realized like it'll be cool to all be in a group together and able to access each other at any point in time. I also realized that, what really made me create the group? Now, everything happens and it's like a blur now. But when I think about it, I did an episode on how to form your own mastermind. And I realized that I'm kind of fortunate in I'm surrounded by women. Maybe it's because I'm in DC and, it's kind of a big hub for us Black women entrepreneurs. But I have, pretty easy access to other like-minded women, but not everyone does. And so that was my initial reason for forming it, so that people could connect with people, find someone in their area, and then get that support with a mastermind, and, or just a whatever group meetup they wanted to do. So that was the original purpose behind it. And now it's just, snowball from there. It's amazing to me. Like, I mention it now on the podcast in every episode. So every episode, more and more people join.
And I love how your website also really ties into that whole funnel of leading people back to the Facebook group. Like, in your show notes, you always have a link to everything, and you have opt-ins, which also lead back to the group as well. So I think when people are designing or trying to build an online brand of some sort, I would say you definitely want to make sure you're using systems that help you build your community as well. Like, I know you use Lead Pages. You were just featured as a case study, and that's another system that definitely helps you grow your audience as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and I've learned about these through just studying other people, like, some of the guests that have been on my show. For example, Maya Elias, I know she's been on your show too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think she might have been the first person I heard of Lead Pages from, right? And just really honing in on the advice that I hear from other women entrepreneurs and then implementing it. Like, that's the only way you learn. Like, you can't just hear it and take notes. You have to implement it right away. It may work, it may not. But I very quickly, I picked up on the fact that you need to capture people and capture their information if you want them to keep coming back, so you can remind them about your content. And if you want to build out your community, like, you need to be giving people valuable things so that they want to give their email address. Like, people don't just want to, that's valuable. You're not just going to drop your email address unless you are receiving something in return. That's why I've created freebies. But you know what? If I had a whole staff, I probably could have a freebie for every episode, like someone like Amy Porterfield has, right? Mm-hmm. That is the ultimate goal, to really just have such a smooth system that for every single episode, there's an opt-in so that, I can just reach more people.
But you're laying the foundation now. And when you do have it, you'll not saying appreciate it, but like, you definitely are on your way to having that.
One day, that's the goal. I'm working on it.
So what are some challenges that you face? Because even just being a podcaster, like, just the other week, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to quit Dreams and Drive. I hate podcasting. Why am I doing this? You know how you just have those moments where you just like doubt everything that you built?
All the time.
What has been one challenge? Because we could talk about a lot of challenges, but just over the past year of having Side Hustle Pro, what's something that maybe I could say a reoccurring challenge that has just keep coming up that you've had to battle with?
So I always say that Side Hustle Pro is a labor of love, because behind all the love of the passion that I love doing this, there is a lot of labor. There was like 90% labor with putting this podcast out each week. And I know, so the biggest challenge is just, figuring out how to get smarter about my system so it's less labor intensive. And right now I'm in a space where I'm trying to like bulk interview, right? So I can go on my honeymoon and be peacefully away and not worried about like, oh man, I didn't have an episode this week. But in order to do that, there is like a lot of scheduling, a lot of recording after work, recording on the weekends that's happening. And that's stressful when you have a lot that you're juggling. So I would say the biggest challenge is just the amount of labor that goes into it right now. And again, that's something that with time and building out a team will get less and less. I had a production person reach out to me. So I've been working with a producer so at least that part of it, I can hand over the episode and he edits and produces and mixes it. But before that, and still with, I'm reaching out to the person, I'm setting it up, and I'm interviewing. All of that is still labor intensive. So just working through that. Hiring a social media intern is next on my list to help with that as well, because I really feel bad when I just don't have enough time to get back to people in a timely manner. Because guess what? Like from 9 to 5:30, like I really am at work, and I really can't be on my phone like I want to. So just dealing with that, yeah.
And you know what though? You also you are planning a wedding. There's just so many things that you have on your plate. And I really feel like it's like hashtag Black Girl Magic, right? So many things that, no, I say that in the sense that, do you ever just sit back and just say, wow, like I'm doing all of this stuff and kind of are amazed at what you have been able to build, doing it part-time, doing it as this Side Hustle Pro podcast is your side hustle, ironically, right?
Yeah, it is kind of like, why am I doing so much? But yeah, I am planning a wedding, and that's like another job in and of itself. And, you know, I feel kind of like shallow saying that, to keep saying like, oh, I have a wedding, I have this, but like it is actually a lot of work to just coordinate everything that's happening. And what was I going to say? I would say too that like, so a few weeks ago, my health started suffering because of just how much stress I was putting on myself. Like I wasn't getting enough rest, and I was like, why do I keep getting sick? And I realized that my immune system was just suffering. Like I wasn't eating properly. I wasn't taking enough care of my health. So that's something I've had to be mindful of, because I want to be a healthy bride and you know, stop getting sick. I've been trying to take a beat on the weekends, and but then, you know, it's stressful beginning of the week again, because it's like, crap, I have so much to do if I had just done it on the weekend. But I truly do need that beat because I can't keep getting sick.
Is your dream to then be able to do Side Hustle Pro full time eventually?
Oh yeah. I see myself. I visualize that. I speak that into existence. Like I do see myself doing Side Hustle Pro full time, as well as other things. Like, you know, that part I'm still fleshing out right now. And I'll be the first to say that, because I think, again, with entrepreneurship, I want to debunk the myth that you have to have everything figured out before you go out there and do your thing. Like, I think the biggest thing is financial security and responsibility. But other than that, like things shift, things change. Like that's why there's serial entrepreneurs. But for sure, I see myself doing Side Hustle Pro full time without a job one day.
What do you think that your podcast over this past year doing the podcast has taught you about yourself? Like, what's a big lesson you've learned about Nicaila Matthews over the past year?
Wow, that is a good one. I think, you know, before I get into what I've learned, I just think I love that question, because I don't take time often enough to kind of sit back and marvel in what I've accomplished, because I feel like that's, you know, like conceited. But so I think that's how people get complacent too. So a lot of times I'm like, okay, that's great. Now let's push to the next thing and like keep going and blah, blah, blah. Like I don't stay still. Like I'm always thinking about the next thing, because not being satisfied is what's always kept me ambitious. But anyway, as far as the biggest thing that I've learned about myself, it is maybe not about myself, but I've learned, I always knew, but it's really been cemented for me that my steps are ordered by God, and that that I've reached a point in my life where I no longer am like, oh my gosh, like what is my purpose and what am I supposed to be doing? Like to me, it's like I might not be able to verbalize it and pinpoint like X is my purpose, but I do know that what I'm doing now is a part of that. Like I know without a doubt that God has put me here to share these stories, to do what I'm doing. And I don't know where he's leading me and where he's taking me. But if there's one thing I know for sure, like Oprah would say, like this is meant to be.
I love that. And I feel a lot of times, sometimes we don't want to let our purpose lead us, right? Sometimes we want to run away from that calling, and it's scary. It's not, I don't want to say scary, but I feel like when you keep trying to run from what you were being called to do, you kind of just get pulled back into it anyway, right? So it's like, why run? Right. Just sit in it and see how everything, works out, how everything pans out. But I want to spend a little bit of time, just because fellow podcaster here, I can't not ask you just some podcasting stuff. What do you think has been like the most technical challenge that you face with building a podcast? Because it's not easy. And especially like being a niche podcaster, being a Black female podcaster, talking about entrepreneurship. There's just so many like cards against us at times, right? What's just something that you specifically with podcasting have had to deal with or try to figure out?
I think the biggest thing for me has been I'm just nitpicky about sound, and maybe I think it's ever since I talked to Joy Marie from Job Logs, and she talked about, we talked about the business of podcasting and how originally a sponsor network reached out to her, and she thinks that, the high quality, the sound and the production of the podcast was one of the reasons. And, they started out working with the producer, and ever since then, I've kind of been more acutely aware of it, but still knowing that, hey, I'm not renting studio space. Like,
I don't got money for that.
I'm not doing that, right? So when the producer reached out to me, I was very open to it. I was like, oh, okay, let's try some things. And he and I, we still go back and forth because I record in my bedroom. It's still not. And there's some days when I'm lazy about the mic's position. So there's still some inconsistencies, but I'm determined, like I'm anal about like, okay, getting this sound to a very professional quality, even in a bedroom. So that's, I think the biggest challenge really is just the production aspect of it and wanting to be taken seriously, but doing it on your own. At the same time, I know that the big guys like Tim Ferriss, are like, whatever, like you're gonna hear my dog barking in the background. Like, I know you're not tuning in because of that. You're tuning in for the story. So I try to balance those two things and not get overly, like I'm still releasing episodes, as you can see, like no matter what, I'm still going to release an episode.
You know who inspires me with that? My leak. Because if you listen to my leak's early podcast, she was recording, like she wasn't even using a mic. She was just using her iPhone headphones, a mic that came with that, and GarageBand. And she was still able to build an audience. So I tell myself, right, it's all about progression. You got to start somewhere. Yeah. So you can have the biggest thing is
consistency. That is my biggest tip for anybody. When I see, and I don't know if it's because, we're podcasters now, so I'm more aware of like how many people are starting podcasts. And tell me if you feel the same, but I feel like a lot of people are starting podcasts. Like, I don't know.
Everybody. I feel like I'm like, no, don't start you don't need to be starting a podcast. Start an Instagram
you don't
page.
Know what no. I'm like, let me tell you something. All right. Like, no, like you have to get listeners. Like I started out my podcast, maybe like 400 people would listen. And that's because I was like, sharing with my personal networks, blah, blah, blah. Like you need so much consistency, so much consistent marketing to actually get listeners each week. So know that.
Yeah, I feel like podcasting is becoming the new blogging, but it can kind of be a little bit like because let's say, I don't want to say like we are professional podcasters because we see our podcast as businesses, right? And at some point it's like, but do you know there's people out here who are like taking their podcast seriously? And I think the thing that annoys me the most, I don't know if you get this, people who reach out to you on tips on how to start a podcast, and you just know in your heart that they don't really want to start a podcast. They just want to hop on the podcast bandwagon. That's what annoys me the most. It's like, I know some people I feel like are just doing it because they think that's what they should be doing. And I feel like if you have a desire to create some type of online platform, make sure you're leveraging the right one, right? Maybe podcasting isn't what you should be doing. Maybe there's some other platform. Maybe it's video. Maybe it's blogging. Yeah. Blogging isn't necessarily dead if you're using it and connecting with a certain audience, but I feel like podcasting is about to be the next, like everyone's doing it. But if you're able to build an audience, it's such a great platform though. It's such a great way. Like I resonate with your story of having a blog and interviewing people and then no one's really listening to it and you're not really having that engagement. It's just something magical about being able to hear it. And then also you can listen to podcasts while you're doing other things, which is what I love.
Yes. Yeah, that's when I first got hooked on it because I used to listen while cooking and doing the dishes and stuff. And, I have no problem with people starting podcasts. I think the upside of it is that the market for advertising and sponsorships might grow when people realize like the validity of this industry, right? So there's upside to that. I just want people, to, sometimes when I see people starting it, I just think like, whoa, I know you think this is going to be easy. Like, I just want you to know it's not. I just want you to know it's a commitment if you truly want to build it out as a business. But everyone has different intentions, right?
That's true.
But that is why I wrote a blog post, though. And I think you've written one as well so that I could easily point people to that. Because, we're not going to get on the phone and talk about that. That's what we're not going to do. You're going to read this blog post just like I did, and you're going to start it. Okay. And then we could talk when you've done it for 6 months.
And I think another big podcasting challenge as we wind down is just thinking about growth and how do you build your audience? How do you actually know what your benchmark should be? Like when you were talking earlier about, what are the download numbers, average download numbers for independent podcasters? How do you get sponsors? That's just a whole nother world. How do you hack the Apple podcast game? That's just something that is a big challenge for me as well. Just trying to figure out what is going to be the key to growth, because for any business, that's what you want, right? You definitely want to increase your subscribers. What has been a way that you've been able to increase your subscribers beyond really leveraging social media?
When I first started out and continuing on, I'm very strategic about thinking about guests, and I try to balance, because I really do like talking to down to earth, everyday women. And then I try to balance that with people who are kind of like pseudo celebrities because they have a certain reach, right? So, those episodes are probably going to spike a little bit more, or it doesn't even have to be a pseudo celebrity. It can be a really solid episode with someone who happens to have a great, audience. One of my favorite episodes was Courtney Sanders of Think and Grow Chick. And, she was so gracious. She shared it with her email list. She shared it with her Facebook group, and things like that were when you'll see spikes. And those spikes tend to, no one spike is responsible for success, but once it's introduced to a new audience, some of that audience, a percentage of that audience will stick around and subscribe. So each week, the downloads are going to go up because with more people subscribe, there are more people who get that auto download every Wednesday, and it goes up from there. So that's one way I've been intentional about growing my podcast. And also you have to but you have to toot your own horn, right? People want to be a part of something that they think is cool and a movement. And so that's how I've always positioned Side Hustle Pro. When I share download numbers, it's about the movement. And, when people are like, whoa, this thing is serious, they're likely to, a percentage of those people who see that are likely to check it out just to say, okay, let me see what this hype is about. She's still talking about this?
Yes.
Let me check it out.
Don't be afraid to toot your own horn. I think that's something that a lot of people are scared of, and they see it as, oh, I don't want to come off as cocky. I don't want to become, no. It's a business, not even a business. It's, if you want to grow, people have to know about it. And you are going to be, especially if you're the podcast, if you're the host, you're kind of like the face of the brand. I think that people just have to get over it. As you said, with the whole social media thing, get over it and realize that although people may say that, oh, I've had people say to me oh, Raina, when I went back to Princeton, one person was like, you're always on social media sharing something, right? And I could have taken it the wrong way because of how the person said it. But then in my head, I'm like, it's, at least they know about it, right? They know what my podcast name is. People will remember if they keep seeing it, and subconsciously that may help you, because you don't know if they might tell someone about it, right? Or there may be a way that it all makes sense. But as we kind of wind down, I know you do this at the end of your episodes and your rapid fire round. What are some of your favorite business tools that have really helped you throughout your side hustle journey? Side hustle pro journey, I should say.
Yes. So favorite business tools of the moment are, let me see, what do I use every week? So of course there's the Google Suite, Google Drive and all of that. That's where I keep everything organized. Also Calendly is what I sync up to my Google account to schedule my interviews. I would be, just lost without that. Skype is how I record my interviews, how we're recording right now. Like that is invaluable. And then business tools day to day. I actually am a pen and paper kind of person. So that's where I've been writing my goals recently. I wasn't always like this. I went through a period where I was big on Asana, but things started changing so rapidly. I was like, let me just write things down. I'm also, a business tool that I really like for on the social media end is Buffer, which helps me to schedule and organize things. Of course, and let me see, what else off the top of my head can I think of that I use business wise? I'm drawing a blank. I'm sorry.
All right. I got another question for you anyway. So, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? Like, thinking about like what's motivating you, what keeps you going when you feel like giving up. 50 years from now, when, podcasting may be somewhere out there in the universe, in the radio waves, whatever, what do you want people to remember Nicaila Matthews for?
I definitely want people to remember Nicaila Matthews for giving back, not leaving, we have this saying as dancers, like, leave it all on the dance floor. Like, I want people to think of me as someone who left it all on earth. Like, there was nothing left to give. So, yes, I want to build out the Side Hustle Pro brand and one day be an entrepreneur. But what I really want is independent wealth so that I can build up my community, build up even my family. Like, success to me is being able to like take care of my parents for the rest of their life. They've done so much to me, so much for me. Like that's what success is in my world. Like, I love our apartment back in the Bronx, but wouldn't it be cool if, they could just be all set in like a townhouse or home, and never have to worry about working again. So that's one thing I think about. I think about the opportunities I've had because I grew up in this country, and I think about those who didn't have those opportunities in my family who grew up in Jamaica. So like, what can I give back to my country to make more people have the opportunities that I did? So that's one legacy I definitely want to leave. My older sister actually moved back to Jamaica. And although I don't see myself moving back to Jamaica, I think we all have that same mindset of, we were put here to do great things, and the real legacy is what we do with what we've achieved.
Oh, that was such a great answer. Thank you for sharing, Nicaila. And you know what I was wondering, and I don't think I've ever asked anyone this, but do you ever have any like Side Hustle Pro haters? And what do you say to and what do you say to people who like may try to give you side eyes or may try to like put you down in some way?
So far, I haven't had any overt haters, anyone hating to my face. But you know what they say, that's like half the time people will smile in your face and probably like talking about you behind your back. So I don't know if I have haters about Side Hustle Pro specifically. In life, yes. But for Side Hustle Pro, but I will say, like, I know it's coming. I know it's coming as things get more and more successful. I'm sure, things will arise, but I don't really care. Like, I see that as coming with the territory. Moyo, my fiance always teases me when, like, in life, when we've been together and I've been like, such and such, is talking about me, or mainly at work. Now, that's where I have some haters. I'll leave that for post-podcast, after show. Anywho, he'll be like, who cares? Like, if you ain't got no haters, you ain't popping. Like, he'll just start singing to, like, cheer me up. And it's true, though. It's really true. At least they know your name, right? They know your name. They know what you do.
So let's go into our lightning round, Nicaila. This part of the interview, I'm going to give you a prompt, and I want you to tell me the first word that comes to mind. And for people who this is your first time listening, we're going to be sticking with our whole dreams and drive metaphor, okay? So the first word is park.
Doubt.
Reverse.
Don't look back.
Neutral.
Lame.
And last but not least, drive.
Achievement.
Those are good. I like that. And if you want to be a dream driver, you have to have your keys to success. So tell me 3 things, Nicaila, that you think every dream driver needs in their toolkit before they hit the road.
Let me take a second. 3 keys to success. Number 1, you have to be willing to start. Number 2, you can't let discouraging days keep you down or make you stop. Like, push through those discouraging days. And number 3, kind of what we were just talking about, like, you got to ignore haters. Like, haters come with the territory when you're successful. So just know that comes with the territory and keep it pushing.
Oh, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to do our listener question. We had one from Wynn Kelly Charles from Twitter. And her question was, how do you keep your questions fresh and diverse on each episode?
I think that the questions really come naturally with the guests, right? So there's some standard questions that I like to just hear from all guests, because over time I found that, those are the things people tend to want to know. But everyone's story is so different that you just start asking them specific questions about their story. So that's how you keep it interesting. Like, you research and you extract pieces of their story that are unique to them and really go a little bit deeper on that.
Thank you for sharing that, Nicaila. Can you tell our dream drivers where they can find you online if they want to connect with you, check out your podcast, check out your course, get in your Facebook group? Give us your info.
Sure. So I am at Side Hustle Pro on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you want to listen to the podcast, we are on everywhere you listen to podcasts, really: iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, SoundCloud. Just search for at Side Hustle Pro. You can go there directly if you go to sidehustlepro.co/podcast. And of course, the main website is sidehustlepro.co.
Thank you. This has been so fun. I hope that our dream drivers enjoyed learning from you and hearing your story as much as I did, Nicaila. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
All right, so that's a wrap for episode 99 with Nicaila Matthews. I hope you enjoyed hearing her dream driving story as well as her keys to success. Now, what did you think of the episode? Let me know by tweeting at Dreams and Drive or sending me a message on Instagram, or you can even screenshot your thoughts and make sure you're tagging Dreams and Drive, sharing your own Instagram stories. Those are my personal favorite ways to share, but if you have other ways, I encourage you guys to do that as well. I love responding and going in and retweeting you all, so please, please, please make sure to do that this time around. If you want today's show notes, all you have to do is go to dreamsanddrive.com and click on episode 99, and you can access everything there. I encourage you to subscribe, rate, and review, especially on Apple Podcasts, because as I explained in the onset, Apple Podcasts is the vehicle that a lot of advertisers use to vet shows. And one of my key goals is monetization and bringing on some sponsors. So your reviews will help me in that area. But at the same time, it will also help future Dream Driver listeners know what you guys think about the show. Lastly, if you want to talk to other dream drivers about the episode or other things related to your own dream driving journey, make sure to check out our exclusive Facebook group. All you have to do is go to dreamsanddrive.com/Facebook, or just search the Dreams and Drive Mastermind on Facebook and you can request access there. All right, so our next episode is going to be episode 100. Are you guys ready for that? I know I am just more so amazed that the show has reached its 100th episode. I really did not even think that far out when I launched it on January 1st of 2016. So I'm excited to just share with you guys my thoughts on the journey thus far, as well as have some special guests that you guys will enjoy as well. Keep dreaming, keep driving, and we will talk soon.